Here's where I put my hand when I stand up to go forward. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I got saved at an Amway convention in spite of. In spite of an altar call. I mean, really. And he did, yeah. And I'm not saying that. I think a lot of people were saved under that.
Sure. Sure.
The Lord's going to convict you there and save you there, but it is not your walking an aisle. It's because the gospel was preached. Yes. Sin was revealed in the heart of man.
Yep.
And the holiness of God has come into focus in the sinner's life to recognize that this is, woe is me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Woe is me. And if it were not for that quickening work of the Lord God, none of us would be living. Woe is me, and I'm on my way to hell. I mean, I remember thinking and hearing that, and I'm not trying to be facetious, but that was frightening to me. That was I think the fear of the Lord. There is the beginning of wisdom. I mean, that's a holy, reverential fear that you are standing before a God that
Yep. It's a fearful thing to fall into the hands of an angry God. And I have things that I would like to say on this as well. However, Mr. Distraction's going to pull us back onto the page here. Let's jump over to Romans chapter 5, verses 6 through 10. I think there's some very interesting things that we can see here. If I could have somebody read chapter 5, verses 6 through 10. Joshua, nice and loud, please. 6 through 10, please.
When we were yet without strength, in due time, Christ died for the ungodly. For scarcely for a righteous man will one die, yet virtue for a good man some would even die, even dare to die. But God commanded his love toward us, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Much more than being now justified by his blood, we shall be saved from wrath through him. For if when we were enemies, we were reconciled to God by the death of his Son, much more being reconciled, we shall be saved by his life.
Thank you. And there was that good King James word, peradventure, that gets used every once in a while. If by chance. Say what, Jim? Not very often. All right, let's make some observations from this section of text. What's the only thing that we as Christians bring to salvation? Our sin. Our sin that made it necessary. Our sin that made us children of wrath, as we'll see in Ephesians 2. That was the only thing. Now, as I was reviewing this, I sort of had a little aha moment. Now, as we look through this section of text, we could mistakenly come away with the idea that mankind was a victim. We were helpless. We were lost in sin. There was nothing we could do. I mean, we were helpless, right? We were helpless, we were ungodly, we were sinners, and we just needed salvation. And and God in his love stooped down and saved us. Now, what I just said is partially true, but what did I leave out? according to verse 10, what big thing did I leave out? Exactly, Jerry, thank you. We were enemies. And I think that's a huge thing, actually, because if you just describe it that we were helpless and we were ungodly and we were sinners and we were victims and we just needed help and we needed this, that, and the other. And then God in his love came along and saved us. Boy, did I just leave out a huge chunk of it or what? We were enemies of God. You know, and my mind goes to such things as World War II or, you know, Braveheart, and you got the Scots against the English and everything. They were enemies. Guess what God did? God, through Jesus Christ, reached across the line and took some of those that were enemies and he brought them over and he reconciled them. Instead, and to me, this is part of why it's so important to go through all the pieces of salvation. Because if you don't pick up all the pieces, we can get it wrong. And then we describe salvation as if it's nothing more than Santa Claus wanting to give you a gift. Instead, it's God reaching across the line of battle and plucking out some of the enemy and saying, these I will take, they were enemies, but I will make them sons. What a fantastic thought. It doesn't make us say, wow. It makes us say, whoa. Amazing when you think about it that way. And so when we consider this whole idea of the glorious gospel, we weren't a 2 made into a 10. We were enemies that were turned into sons. And it's passive. You are saved. You have been saved. It's never, I saved myself. I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. I called on the Lord. I made a decision. Yes, Jim.
Verse 10 of Romans 5, where he says, for while we were enemies, we were reconciled to God.
Yes.
Reconciled is passive.
Yeah.
We had nothing to do with that reconciliation.
Exactly. And actually, I appreciate you bringing up the word reconcile because that fascinated me so much. I looked it up in the Greek to find out what word it was. And if I get the pronunciation close, it's katalasso, which means to change two parties into the same position. Now, if we take a teacup and break it, and it breaks kind of cleanly, we can kind of put it back together. But the break's still there, right? When God reconciles, he puts the parts together and they blend, and it's perfect. Now, to be clear, he doesn't meet us halfway and kind of do this blending thing, and there we patch it all up and it's okay. No. He brings us to himself. He says, if you're going to be one of mine, you're going to change to look like my dear son. It's kind of weird, but I saw this picture one time of these guys, and they were in like soldier outfits, and they had the camo pants on and the vests and the whole, and holding an AR-15 or something like that. And there was just this one guy, and I mean he was in the same kind of outfit and everything, but I mean this guy was like way overweight, and he did not have the representative physique of a soldier. And my thought was, yeah, that couldn't happen. You don't get to join the military and be 100 pounds overweight and stay that way. You don't get to join and remain as you are. If I'm not mistaken, the point of boot camp is to take a nothing and make him a soldier, him or her, whatever, or make him a Marine, whatever the case may be. So why would we think we could come to Christ and remain as we are? Absolutely not. When God turns us from an enemy into a son, it's a lifelong process of being made to look like Jesus Christ. And it's a lifelong process called sanctification. Exactly. We don't get to stay as we are. We're continuously being changed.
The illustration of Antica actually makes a new cup. Doesn't even, that cup is gone, and it makes us a new cup.
Right. Right.
There is no crack in that.
There's no crack. And you couldn't even hold it up to the bright sunlight and see the wax of the cracks. It's a brand new. Behold, all things are become new, doesn't it say? Joshua.
You were asking the question like, what do we bring to Christ? I thought of a verse in a song. Nothing on earth I bring, only to the cross I came.
Right. Right. Nothing in my hands I bring, only to thy cross I cling. Absolutely.
Well, I would add to that, Joshua, when he makes us new, it is complete. It is immediate. We just reside in an unredeemed body of flesh. So it's not a partial renewal. Like Jerry said, it's the new creation is a new creation.
Absolutely.
We're just waiting for the redemption of the body. The last time.
Pastor Jim, would you look up Ephesians chapter 2 for us? But the big thing, as he's looking that passage up, the big thing that I want to take away from the Romans 5 is we're not victims. We were enemies. But God commended his love toward us in that while we were sinners, Christ, let me insert something, reached across that line, took one of the enemies, and died for us, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him. Amazing. Pastor Jim, if you would read Ephesians 2, 1 through 5 for us, please.
And you were dead in your trespasses and sins, in which you formerly walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, of the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. Among them we too all formerly lived in the lusts of our flesh, indulging the desires of the flesh, of the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, even as the rest. But God, being rich in mercy, because of his great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in our transgressions, made us alive together with Christ. The grace you have been saved.
Now, doesn't it say in verse 3 that we were children of wrath? Does it say most of us were? Does it say that some people came to the cross and got a special deal because of their last name or their genetic heritage? Or does it say that all of us, all of us were children?
By nature, we're all
Children of wrath. We were children of wrath. And we were dead, but we have been made alive. And that whole children of wrath thing, we can extrapolate that out and go different places with that, maybe in eschatology or whatever. The idea that the wrath of God is no longer toward us. Why is that wrath not toward us? Was that wrath extinguished? Was that wrath diverted? Was that wrath vaporized and it became nothing? And God looked at us and took pity on us and said, you know what, I'm not going to exercise my wrath on them.
It was assuaged.
Can I suggest a different word?
No, that's a good word. I've been taught that word, and I'm using that word.
You learned that word. Lisa, lady.
It's in the Spanish, because God had to pour out wrath on someone.
Yes.
It had to be Christ.
Yes.
AKA someday.
Here's the word I want to use. It was spent. It was not withdrawn. It was not vaporized. Remember way back at the beginning in the divine dilemma that we were talking about? It wasn't warped. It wasn't put back on the shelf. It was spent on our behalf completely on Christ. This is why we can no longer be children of wrath, because the wrath that was meant for us was spent on Christ. And therefore now we are no longer children of wrath. It's a beautiful thing. But only when we look at the terms of the gospel in their entirety. If we glaze over it and we make God into Santa Claus, take salvation if you want, then we've missed it. And that's why this study is so important. Yes, Joshua?
Another way to put it is, we weren't, it wasn't just we were covered. Like, I think I would forget that I'm sorry, finally, someone doesn't testify, someone covers me. By the thing that I could not.
And this is what we are referring to when we sing the song, Jesus paid it all to him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain. He washed it white as snow. Do I have a lingering debt? Nope, it's gone. Exactly. All right, let's move on to the last little section here. And this is glorious, what he talks about here. Can I have someone read Titus chapter 3, verses 3 through 5, please? Titus 3, 3 through 5. Chuck.
When the kindness of God our Savior and his love for mankind appeared, he saved us not in the basis of deeds which we have done in righteousness, but according to his mercy and by the washing of regeneration and renewal by the Holy Spirit.
Absolutely. All right. Now, first, I want to remind you of 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 4. And just the one little phrase where it talks about the light of the glorious gospel. The light of the glorious gospel. Now, in 2 Corinthians 4:4, if I'm not mistaken, it talks about how the fact that the minds are blinded by the evil one so that the light of the glorious gospel doesn't come through. But what does it say there in our passage? Chuck, can you read that first verse again? Or the second verse, actually, verse 4. Oh, sorry. Titus 3:4, please. Stop there, if you would, please. That word appeared. I looked it up. It's the Greek word, and I'm not making this one up, epiphino, which means to appear on. It has the light. It has the idea of the light coming through from the heavens. Think of it for a moment on a really cloudy day. I mean, it's been nothing but thick clouds all day long. And then all of a sudden, you see a ray of light that breaks through. Now, what also is buried in the word epiphino? E-P-I-P-H. An epiphany. Is that not where we get the word epiphany? It makes sense now, doesn't it? Now, what character in the book of Acts had an epiphany, a shining of light that knocked him to the ground. The Apostle Paul. By the way, it didn't knock him off his horse. There's no record of a horse. So I just wanted to clear that up. But it not only knocked him to the ground, but it blinded him. He had that epiphany. The light of the glorious gospel did shine to him. Isn't that amazing? So again, it's a mistake to describe God and salvation like Santa Claus. Hey, salvation's great. Take it if you want it, because it can really be a help to you. Are you kidding me? Look at Paul on the road to Damascus. An epiphany. An epiphany, by the way, Paul figured out real quick he couldn't fight against it. I mean, he surrendered like that.
Well, MacArthur says in his that he's actually speaking of Christ.
To what are you referring, Jerry?
Appeared is actually, if you would say, to write his love for mankind, Christ.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying, Christ.
Yeah.
That he appears, Christ came, which makes a lot of sense too in that sense.
Sure.
Because when the kindness of God our Savior and his love for mankind, Christ appeared. So it's just a different vision.
Yeah.
And you're right.
Everything about what Christ was and what Christ came for and everything that Christ accomplished was salvation. It's not something we did by ourselves. It was his epiphany, his appearing. And the only way that we were given permission to see it was that someone opened our eyes. Otherwise, we would have been like the hearts that were blinded, like in 2 Corinthians 4:4. But it was a privilege given to us by God that we got to be like the disciples on the road to Emmaus. Did not our hearts burn within us? We got to see it. We were given that privilege. Wow. Now, look in verse 5. Of course, it's not by works of righteousness which we have done, but according to his mercy. Again, according to his mercy, he saved us. It's passive. It's not something we accomplish. No one will stand in heaven and say, I did it my way. Absolutely ridiculous. We were saved. He plucked us out.
Why are you saying that's passive?
Can you read verse 5 for us?
Yeah, he's saying it's not the base of deeds which we have done in the mercy, but according to his mercy. You're saying his mercy is passive.
No.
No, okay.
No. I'm saying he saved us. It was something that was done to us.
Us would be the passive, not the mercy.
Correct. He saved us. We were saved. In all of that language, it never talks about something that we achieved. I climbed the mountain. I jumped over the fence. I jumped over the line. I beat so-and-so. No, these things were done to us, which means we cannot take any credit for it. That's exactly. And so those that would say, but I made the choice, I'd be like, have you read the scriptures? Because your choice had nothing to do with it. Your choice would have been towards sin. My choice would have been towards sin. I was an enemy of God. Romans 5:8. But God commended his love toward us. Toward me, he reached across that battle line and took one of the enemies and said, I will make him a son. Nothing to do with what I wanted. I wanted nothing to do with it. I wanted to continue as an enemy of God. God said, no, I will take you as an enemy and I will make you my son. The adoption. And if you want to study more about that, go do a study through Galatians. It's fascinating. Now, the washing of regeneration. That's new life. That's salvation. Pastor Jim, I think you had some comments on that at one time we were having a conversation about the washing. It's not the ceremonial washing that was in in the Old Testament. Do you remember what the comments you made?
Can't be all accountable for anything I've said in the past, but, I can tell you.
Can I quote you on that?
The washing of regeneration is not tied to baptism, it is tied to, even what Jesus said to Nicodemus. That this is part of the new birth. And that's why he said, you're the teacher of Israel, and you don't know these things, because this was even clear in the Old Testament. The leopard can't change his spots. The Ethiopian can't change his skin as a consequence. These are things that are done by the power of God that are outside of anything that we do or say. I don't remember exactly what I said and when I said it, but this washing is the act of the new birth and the regeneration. The renewing of the Holy Spirit is being born from above. You must be born from above.
I think that captures exactly what we were talking about that time, so thank you. The washing of regeneration, it's the new life. Again, we go back to Lazarus. Lazarus is the picture. Lazarus was not coaxed out of the grave. Lazarus did not walk an aisle. Ephesians 2. But you were dead. And just to make sure that he was dead, Jesus waited, 4 days? For behold, he stinketh. He's on the way out. Just as a strange aside, if you go back into the Old Testament, God promised that he would not let his Holy One see corruption, decomposition. Yeah, he is. He is. But Jesus was only in the grave. Lazarus was beginning in the corruption point. Exactly. Behold, he stinketh. But Jesus was only dead for 3 days. Just an interesting aside. This is a fascinating study. But I love the comprehensive nature of it, that we can take the pieces apart, look at them individually, that we can be scriptural about it, and that we can try and align them properly because we have a proper view of God and his attributes. And I think it was Pastor Loker who was saying, a proper view of God begins with a proper view of the attributes of God. God is not Santa Claus, hoping you choose him, hoping you take his gift of salvation if you've got the time and if you want to. No, God reached across the battlefield, took some of the enemies, and made them sons. Totally different. Let's bow in prayer. Our Father, thank you for what you are teaching us. Lord, we are